Hello, BookTube, and welcome back to our reading of Dracula by Bram Stoker, a novel that literally needs no introduction. And we are up to chapter 11. Poor Lucy is being tended now not only by Dr. Seward, but also by Abraham Van Helsing, who clearly has an idea of what is wrong with her that he is not sharing with anyone. He has made two explicit instructions. One is that Dr. Seward stay with Lucy while she sleeps without leaving her for even so much as an instant. And the other is that not only the room, the doors, the lintels, the fireplace, but also Lucy's person be guarded with garlic flowers. And now we are moving on to, we're going to get a little bit more from her diary and a few other things here in this chapter. So we'll start off with Lucy's diary. This is the 11th of September. How good they are all to me. I quite love the dear Dr. Van Helsing. I wonder why he is so anxious about these flowers. He positively frightened me, he was so fierce. And yet he must have been right, for I feel comfort from them already. Somehow I do not dread being alone tonight, and I can go to sleep without fear. I shall not mind any flapping outside the window. Oh, the terrible struggle that I have against sleep so often of late, the pain of the sleeplessness, or the pain of the fear of sleep, with such unknown horrors as it has for me. How blessed are some people whose lives have no fears, no dreads, to whom sleep is a blessing that comes nightly and brings nothing but sweet dreams. Well, here I am tonight, hoping for sleep, and lying like Ophelia in the play with virgin krantz and maiden strewments. I never liked garlic before, but tonight it is delightful. There is peace in its smell. I feel sleep coming on already. Good night, everybody. Then we get an excerpt from Dr. Seward's diary, dated for the next day, the 12th of September. Called at the Berkeley and found Van Helsing, as usual, up to the time. The carriage ordered from the hotel was waiting. The professor took his bag, which he always brings with him now. Let all be down exactly. Van Helsing and I arrived at Hillingham at 8 o'clock. It was a lovely morning. The bright sunshine and all the fresh feeling of early autumn seemed like the completion of nature's annual work. The leaves were turning to all kinds of beautiful colors, but had not yet begun to drop from the trees. When we entered, we met Mrs. Westenra coming out of the morning room. She's always an early riser. She greeted us warmly and said, "You will be glad to know that Lucy is better. The dear child is still asleep. I looked into her room and saw her, but did not go in, lest I should disturb her." The professor smiled and looked quite jubilant. He rubbed his hands together and said, "Aha! I thought I had diagnosed the case. The treatment is working." To which she answered, "You must not take all the credit yourself, doctor. Lucy's state this morning is due in part to me." "How do you mean, ma'am?" asked the professor. "Well, I was anxious about the dear child in the night and went into her room. She was sleeping soundly, so soundly that even my coming did not wake her. But the room was awfully stuffy. There were a lot of those horrid, strong-smelling flowers about everywhere, and she had actually a bunch of them round her neck. I feared that the heavy odor would be too much for the dear child in her weak state, so I took them all away and opened a bit of the window to let in the fresh air. You will be pleased with her, I am sure." She moved off into her boudoir, where she usually breakfasted early. As she had spoken, I watched the professor's face and saw it turn ashen gray. He had been able to retain his self-command whilst the poor lady was present, for he knew her state and how mischievous a shock it would be. He actually smiled on her as he held the door open for her to pass into her room, but the instant she had disappeared, he pulled me suddenly and forcibly into the dining room and closed the door. Then, for the first time in his life, I saw Van Helsing break down. He raised his hand over his head in a sort of mute despair, and then beat his palms together in a helpless way. Finally, he sat down on a chair and, putting his hands before his face, began to sob, with loud, dry sobs that seemed to come from the very racking of his heart. Then he raised his arms again, and as though appealing to the whole universe. "God, God, God," he said, "what have we done? What has this poor thing done that we are so sore beset? Is there fate amongst us still, sent down in the pagan world of old, that such things must be, and in such way? This poor mother, all unknowing, and all for the best as she think, does such a thing as lose her daughter body and soul. We must not tell her, we must not even warn her, or how she die, and then both die. Oh, how we are beset! How are all the powers of the devils against us!" Suddenly he jumped to his feet. "Come," he said, "come, we must see and act. Devils or no devils, or all the devils at once, it matters not. We fight him all the same." But it's not the devil with a capital D that he's referring to here. This is the first specific mention that Van Helsing makes of an individual opponent. And it's not the devil. He went to the hall door for his bag, and together we went up to Lucy's room. Once again I drew up the blind, whilst Van Helsing went toward the bed. This time he did not start, as he looked on the poor face with the same awful waxen pallor as before. He wore a look of stern sadness and infinite pity. "As I expected," he murmured, with that hissing inspiration of his which meant so much. Without a word he went and locked the door, and then began to set out on the little table the instruments for yet another operation of the transfusion of blood. I had long ago recognized the necessity and began to take off my coat, but he stopped me with a warning hand. "No," he said. "Today you must operate. I shall provide. You are weakened already." As he spoke, he took off his coat and rolled up his shirt sleeve. Again the operation, again the narcotic, again some of the return of color to the ashy cheeks, and the regular breathing of healthy sleep. This time I watched whilst Van Helsing recruited himself and rested. Presently he took an opportunity of telling Mrs. Westenra that she must not remove anything from Lucy's room without consulting him, that the flowers were of medicinal value, and that the breathing of their odor was part of the system of cure. Then he took over the care of the case himself, saying that he would watch this night and the next, and would send me word when to come. After another hour, Lucy waked from her sleep, fresh and bright and seemingly not much the worse for her terrible ordeal. What does it all mean? I'm beginning to wonder if my long habit of life amongst the insane is beginning to tell on my own brain. Well, I wouldn't trust you with the household cat, that's for sure, Dr. Seward, but you're not going to have to worry about poor Mrs. Westenra interfering for too much longer. She has a weak heart, after all. And generally speaking, a weak heart and a house that is regularly being visited by Count Dracula don't really go together. But first, we'll get Lucy's diary for the 17th of September. 4 days and nights of peace. I'm getting so strong again that I hardly know myself. It is as if I had passed through some long nightmare and had just wakened to see the beautiful sunshine and feel the fresh air of the morning around me. I have a dim half-remembrance of long, anxious times of waiting and fearing, darkness in which there was not even the pain of hope to make present distress more poignant, and then long spells of oblivion and the rising back to life as a diver coming up through a great press of water. Since, however, Dr. Van Helsing has been with me, this bad dreaming seems to have passed away. The noises that used to frighten me out of my wits, the flapping against the window, again, just like it would be. This flapping against the window, constantly. The distant voices which seemed so close to me, the harsh sounds that came from I know not where and commanded me to do I know not what, have all ceased. I go to bed now without any fear of sleep. I do not even try to keep awake. I've grown quite fond of the garlic, and the boxful arrives for me every day from Haarlem. Tonight Dr. Van Helsing is going away, as he has to be for a day in Amsterdam, but I need not be watched. I am well enough to be left alone. Thank God for Mother's sake, and dear Arthur's, and for all our friends who have been so kind. I shall not even feel the change, for last night Dr. Van Helsing slept in his chair a lot of the time. I found him asleep twice when I woke, but I did not fear to go asleep again, although the bows and bats had something flapped angrily against the window panes. Something is flapping angrily against her window panes. She doesn't go to look what it is. Apparently she doesn't tell anyone. They don't go to look what it is. Then we get, I've mentioned before, that one of the genius signatures of this novel is that Stoker is always he's always varying the narration. We're not getting this. Dracula is not written in a standard past tense of one person telling a story, as it could easily have been. This could easily be a novel entirely narrated by Dr. Seward, who sees pretty much everything that's important. He learns later on what's important from Jonathan Arca that he didn't see, but it isn't that. Instead, it's one dispatch after another to constantly keep your point of view engaged. And what we get here is a newspaper article from the Pall Mall Gazette dated the 18th of September, entitled "The Escaped Wolf, Perilous Adventures of Our Interviewer." And it is subtitled "An Interview with the Keeper of the Zoological Gardens." After many inquiries and almost as many refusals, and perpetually using the words Pall Mall Gazette as a sort of talisman, I managed to find the keeper of the section of the Zoological Gardens in which the wolf department is included. Thomas Builder lives in one of the cottages in the enclosure behind the elephant house, and was just sitting down to his tea when I found him. Thomas and his wife are hospitable folk, elderly and without children, and if the specimen I enjoyed of their hospitality be of the average kind, their lives must be pretty comfortable. The keeper would not enter on what he called business until the supper was over, and we were all satisfied. Then, when the table was cleared and he had lit his pipe, he said, "Now, sir, you can go on and ask me what you want. You'll excuse me refusing to talk of personal subjects afore meals, of professional subjects before meals. I gives the wolves and the jackals and the hyenas and all our section their tea before I begins to ask them questions." "How do you mean, ask them questions?" I queried, wishful to get him into a talkative humor. "Hitting of them over the head with a pole is one way, scratching their ears is another. Them gents is in a flush wants a bit of show off to the gals. I don't much mind the flush, 'tis hitting the pole afore I chucks in their dinner, but I waits till they had their sherry and coffee, so to speak, afore I try them on with the ear scratching. Mind you," he said philosophically, "there's a deal of the same nature in us as in them animals." "Really, Mr. Builder? So people routinely think they can beat you over the head? Really? How would you react if somebody did that even once?" But anyway, here's you coming asking questions about my business, and I a grumpy like with only your bloomin' arfid I'd have seen you blowed at first I'd first answer. Okay, whatever that means. Nor even when you asked me sarcastic like if I wanted you to ask the superintendent if he might ask me questions. Without offense, did I tell you to go to L? You did. And when you said you report me for using obscene language that was hitting me over the head. No, it wasn't. Hitting you over the head is hitting you over the head. But the Arf Quid made that all right. He paid him to get this interview. "I weren't going to fight, so I waited for the food and did my all as the wolves and lions and tigers does. But Lord love ye art now, there are old humans has stuck a chunk of his tea cake in me and rinsed me out with her bloomin' old teapot, and I've lit her up, and you may scratch my ears all you're worth, and won't get even a growl out of me. Drive along with your questions. I know what you're coming at, the escaped wolf." You got a lot of attitude on you there for a wolf keeper one of whose wolves has just escaped. Maybe a little more humble pie with your tea would be good. Exactly. I want you to give me your view of it. Just tell me how it happened, and when I know the facts, I'll get you to say what you consider was the cause of it, and how you think the whole affair will end. "All right, Governor. This here's about the whole story. That 'ere wolf was called Bearsicker. It was one of those 3 gray ones that come from Norway. Whilst we was brought him off 4 years ago. He was a nice, well-behaved wolf that never gave no trouble to talk of. I'm surprised at him for wanting to get out, nor any other animals in the place. But there, you can't trust wolves nor woman. The place is a jail, and you are a sadistic jailkeeper. So any normal person would want to escape." "Don't you mind him, sir," broke in Mrs. Tom with a cheery laugh. "He's got a mind in the animals so long that bless him if he ain't like an old wolf himself. There ain't no harm in him." "Well, sir, it was about 2 hours after feeding yesterday when I first heard the disturbance. I was making up a litter in the monkey house for a young puma which was ill. When I heard the yelping and howling, I came away straight. There was Bearsicker a-tearing like a mad thing at the bars as if he wanted to get out. There wasn't much people about that day, and close at hand was only one man, a tall, thin chap with a hooked nose and a beaked beard and a few white hairs running through it. He had a hard, cold look and red eyes, and I took a sort of mislike to him, for it seemed as if it was him that was irritated at. He had white kid gloves on his hands, and he pointed out the animals to me and says, 'Keeper, these wolves seem upset at something.' 'Maybe it's you,' I says, for I did not like the airs he gave himself. He didn't get angry, as I hoped he would, but he smiled a kind of insolent smile with a mouthful of white, sharp teeth. 'Oh, no, they wouldn't like me.' 'Oh, yes, they would,' I says, I imitating him. 'They always like a bone or two to clean their teeth at about tea time, which is use a bag full.' In other words, you're a bag of bones. He's trying to pick a fight with Dracula. 'Well, it is an odd thing, but when the animals see us a-talking, they lay down, and went over to Bearsnicker. He let me stroke his ears same as ever. Then their man came over, and bless him, if he didn't put his hand out and stroke the old wolf's ears, too. 'Take care,' I said. 'Bearsicker's quick.' 'Never mind,' he said. 'I am used to them.' 'Are you in the business yourself?' I says, taking off my hat for a man who's trade in wolves, and his good friend to keepers? No, he said, not exactly in the business, but I've made pets of several. And with that he lifts his hat as pert as a lord and walks away. Old Berserker kept a-looking after him till he was out of sight, and then went and lay down in a corner and wouldn't come out of his hole of heaven. Well, last night, as soon as the moon was up, the wolves here all began howling. There weren't nothing for 'em to howl at. There weren't no one near, except someone that was evidently calling dogs somewhere out back of the gardens of the park road. Once or twice I went out to see that all was right, and it was. Then the howling stopped. Just before 12 o'clock, I just took a look round after turning in, and bust me, when I come in opposite old Berserker's cage, I see the rails broken and twisted about the cage, and the cage empty. And that's all I know for certain. Did anyone else see anything? One of the gardeners was a-coming about that time from the Armony, but he says a big gray dog come about through the garden edges. At least, so he says, but I don't give much to it myself, for he did never use a word about it to the missus when he got home. And it was only after the escape of the wolf was made known, we'd been up all night a-hunting of the park for Berserker, that he remembered seeing anything. My own belief was that the Armony got in his head. Now, Mr. Builder, can you account in any way for the escape of the wolf? Well, sir, he said, with a suspicious sort of modesty, I think I can, but I don't know as how you'd be satisfied with the theory. Certainly I shall, if a man like you, who knows the animals from experience, can't hazard a good guess at any rate. Who is even to try? Well, sir, accounts it this way. Seems to me that there wolf escaped simply because he wanted to get out. Thanks. You're a real help. From the hearty way that both Thomas and his wife laughed at the joke, I could see that it had done service before, and that the whole explanation was simply an elaborate sell. I couldn't cope in badinage with the worthy Thomas, but I thought I knew a surer way to his heart. So I said, now, Mr. Builder, we'll consider that first half-sovereign worked off, and this brother of his is waiting to be claimed when you've told me what you think will happen. He's still willing to pay the guy, even though he's a jerk. Right ye are, sir, he said briskly. You excuse me, for I know a chaffin' of ye, but the old woman here winked at me, which is as much as telling me to go on. Well, I never, said the old lady. My opinion is this. If this here wolf is hiding somewhere, the gardener didn't remember that he said a galloping northwards faster than a horse could go, but I don't believe him. For, you see, wolves don't gallop no more than dogs does, they being not built that way. Wolves is fine things, a storybook, but I dare say when you gets a pack and does the chivying sometimes there's be more fear to them that can make the devil a noise and chop it up, whatever it is. But Lord bless you, in real life, wolf is only a low creature, not half so clever or bold as a good dog, and not half a quarter so much fight in him. Okay. Easy enough thing to test. Take a fighting dog. In Victorian London, there were plenty of them. Take a fighting dog and pit it against an Alaskan timber wolf, an adult male Alaskan timber wolf. See who has the most fight in him. Make your bets quick, though, because it's not going to last long. This ain't one to be used to fighting or even providing for himself, and more like he's somewhere around the park a-hiding and a-shivering. And if he thinks at all, wondering where he's got to get his breakfast from, or maybe he's got down some area and is in a coal cellar. My eye, won't some cook get a rum start when she sees his green eyes a-shining at her out of the dark. If he can't get food, he's bound to look for it, and mayhap he chance to light on a butcher's shop in time. If he doesn't, and some nursemaid goes a-walking off without a soldier, leaving a infant in the perambular, well, then I shouldn't be surprised if the census is one baby the less. That's all. I was handing him the half-sovereign when something came bobbing up against the window, and Mrs. Builder's face doubled its natural length with surprise. God bless me, he said, if it ain't old Berserker come back himself. He went to the door and opened it. A most unnecessary proceeding, it seemed to me. I have always thought that a wild animal never looks so well as when some obstacle of pronounced durability is between us. Personal experience has intensified rather than diminished that idea. After all, however, there is nothing like custom, for neither Builder nor his wife thought any more of the wolf than I should of a dog. The animal itself was as peaceful and well-behaved as that father of all picture wolves, Red Riding Hood's quondam friend, whilst moving her confidence in masquerade. The wolf scene was an unutterable mixture of comedy and pathos. The wicked wolf that for half a day had paralyzed London and set all children in town shivering in their shoes was there in a sort of penitent mood and was received and petted like a sort of vulpine prodigal son. Old Builder examined him all over with most tender solicitude, and when he finished this with his penitent, said, "There, I knew the poor old chap would get into some trouble. Didn't I say it all along? Here's his head all cut and full of broken glass. He's been a-getting all over some bloomin' wall or other. It's a shame that some people are allowed to top their walls with broken bottles. This here's what comes of it. Come along, Bear Snicker." He took the wolf and locked him in a cage with a piece of meat that satisfied, in a quantity at any rate, the elementary conditions of the fatted calf, and went on to report. I came off too, and to report the only exclusive information that is given today regarding the strange escapade at the zoo. So the reporter from the Pall Mall Gazette is in this guy's kitchen when the wolf returns to the house and just walks in and is petted over. Then we return to Dr. Seward's diary, and this is the 17th of September. I was engaged after dinner in my study, posting up my books, which, through the press of other work and many other visits to Lucy, had fallen sadly into arrears. Suddenly the door was burst open, and in rushed my patient, with his face distorted with passion. I was thunderstruck, for such a thing as a patient getting of his own accord into the superintendent's study is almost unknown. Without an instant's pause, he made straight at me. He had a dinner knife in his hand, and as I saw he was dangerous, I tried to keep the table between us. Note the parallel, right? I mean, Bram Stoker he's a very, very vivid, very readable writer, but he's not exactly deep. Note the parallel. The wolf has just got into the kitchen. Now Renfield has burst into the study. He was too quick and too strong for me, however. Before I could get my balance, he had struck at me and cut my left wrist rather severely. Before he could strike again, however, I got in my right, and he was sprawling on his back on the floor. My wrist bled freely, and quite a little pool trickled on the carpet. I saw that my friend was not intent on further effort, and occupied myself binding up my wrist, keeping a wary eye on the prostrate figure the whole time. When the attendants rushed in, and we turned our attention on him, his employment positively sickened me. He was lying on his belly on the floor, licking up, like a dog, the blood which had fallen from my wounded wrist. He was easily secured, and to my surprise went with the attendants quite placidly, simply repeating over and over again, "The blood is life! The blood is life!" An amazing scene that, as far as I know, has never been filmed. Dr. Seward just catching up on his records when Renfield breaks into his room to try to kill him. I cannot afford to lose blood just at present, says Renfield, because he's constantly transfusing blood to Lucy. I have lost too much for late of my physical good, and then the prolonged strain of Lucy's illness and its horrible phases is telling on me. I am overexcited and weary, and I need rest. Happily, Van Helsing has not summoned me, so I need not forego my sleep. Tonight, I could not well do without it. Then we have a telegram from Dr. Van Helsing to Seward for the 17th of September. Just a quick telegram. Do not fail to be at Hillingham tonight. If not watching all the time, frequently visit and see that flowers are as placed. Very important. Do not fail. Shall be with you as soon as possible after arrival. So we get diary entries. We get a newspaper account. We get a telegram. It's all shifting up very expertly to keep us reading. Then we have Dr. Seward's diary, dated the 18th of September. Just off for a train to London. The arrival of Van Helsing's telegram filled me with dismay. A whole night lost, and I know by bitter experience what may happen in a night. Of course, it is possible that all may be well, but what may have happened? Surely there's some horrible doom hanging over us all, that every possible accident should thwart us in all we do. I shall take this cylinder with me, and when I can, complete my entry on Lucy's phonograph. So keep in mind, this is another variation of the way we're getting the story, because Dr. Seward's diary is something he's recording. He's not writing it. He's recording it on a phonograph. Then we get a memorandum left by Lucy. She writes this up on the night of the 17th of September. She writes this up. This is not in her diary. This is, I write this and leave it to be seen, so that no one might by any chance get any trouble through me. This is an exact record of what took place tonight. I feel I am dying of weakness, and have barely enough strength to write, but it must be done if I die in the doing of it. I went to bed as usual, taking care that the flowers were placed as Dr. Van Helsing directed, and soon fell asleep. I was wakened by the flapping at my window, which was begun after that sleepwalking on the cliff at Whitby when Mina saved me, and which now I know so well. How about you not get used to it? Instead of knowing it so well, why don't you figure out what it is and maybe shoot it? I was not afraid, But I did wish that Dr. Seward was in the next room, as Dr. Van Helsing said he would be, so that I might have called him. I tried to go to sleep, but could not. Then there came to me the old fear of sleep, and I determined to keep awake. Perversely, sleep would try to come, and then I did not want it. So, as I feared to be alone, I opened my door and called out, "Is anybody there?" There was no answer. I was afraid to wake Mother, so I closed my door again. Then outside in the shrubbery I heard the sort of howl like a dog's, but more fierce and deeper. I went to the window and looked out, but could see nothing, except a big bat, which had evidently been buffeting its wings against the window. So I went back to bed again, but determined not to go to sleep. Presently the door opened, and Mother looked in. Seeing by my moving that I was not asleep, came in and sat with me. She said, even more sweetly and softly than was her wont, "I was uneasy about you, darling, and came in to see that you were all right." I feared that she might catch cold sitting there, and asked her to come in and sleep with me. So she came into the bed, and laying down beside me, but she did not take off her dressing gown, for she said she would only stay a little while and go back to her own bed. As she lay there in my arms, and I in hers, the flapping and buffeting came to the window again. She was startled and a little frightened, and cried out, "What is that?" I tried to pacify her, and at last succeeded, and she lay quiet. But I could hear her poor dear heart still beating terribly. After a while there was a low howl again out in the shrubbery, and shortly after that there was a crash at the window, and a lot of broken glass was hurled on the floor. The window blind blew back with the wind that rushed in, and the aperture of the broken panes there was the head of a great, gray, gaunt wolf. So that's how Berserker got the glass on his head. It wasn't from the top of somebody's wall. It was from smashing in the window of Lucy's bedroom. Mother cried out in fright, and struggled up into a sitting posture, and clutched wildly at anything that would help her. Among other things, she clutched the wreath of flowers that Dr. Van Helsing insisted on my wearing around my neck, and tore it away from me. For a second or two she sat up, pointing at the wolf, and there was a strange and horrible gurgling in her throat. And then she fell over, as struck with lightning, and her head hit my forehead and made me dizzy for a moment or two. The room and all around seemed to spin. I kept my eyes fixed on the window, but the wolf drew his head back, and a whole myriad of little specks seemed to come blowing in through the broken window, and wheeling and circling about like pillars of dust, like a pillar of dust that travelers describe when there is a simoon in the desert. I tried to stir, but there was some spell on me. Dear Mother's poor body, which seemed to grow cold already, for her dear heart had ceased to beat, weighed me down, and I remembered no more for a while. Glittering motes in the air. Just like in Castle Dracula. The time did not seem long, but very, very awful, till I recovered consciousness again. Somewhere near, a passing bell was tolling. The dogs all around the neighborhood were howling, and in our shrubbery, seemingly just outside, a nightingale was singing. I was dazed and stupid with pain and terror and weakness, but the sound of the nightingale seemed like the voice of my dead mother come back to me. She's lying on top of you. This sound seemed to awaken the maids, too, for I could hear their bare feet pattering outside my door. I called to them, and they came in, and when they saw what had happened and what it was that lay over me on the bed, they screamed. The wind rushed in through the broken window, and the door slammed. They lifted off the body of my dear mother and laid her, covered up with a sheet, on the bed after I had got up. They were all so frightened and nervous that I directed them to go to the dining room and have each a glass of wine. The door flew open for an instant and closed again. The maid shrieked and then went in a body to the dining room, and I laid what flowers I had on my dear mother's breast. When they were there, I remembered what Dr. Helsing had told me, but I didn't like to remove them, and besides, I would have some of the servants to sit up with me now. I was surprised that the maids did not come back. I called them, but I got no answer, so I went to the dining room to look for them. My heart sank when I saw what had happened. They all four lay helpless on the floor, breathing heavily. The decanter of sherry was on the table half full, but there was a queer, acrid smell about. I was suspicious and examined the decanter. It smelled of laudanum. And looking on the sideboard, I found that the bottle which Mother's doctor uses for her, did use, was empty. What am I to do? What am I to do? I am back in the room with Mother. I cannot leave her, and I am all alone, save for the sleeping servants whom someone has drugged. Alone with the dead. I dare not go out, for I can hear the low howl of the wolf through the broken window. The air seems full of specks, floating and circling in the draught from the window, and the light burns blue and dim. What am I to do? God shield me from the harm this night. I shall hide this paper in my breast, where they shall find it when they come and lay me out. My dear mother gone. It is time I go too. Goodbye, dear Arthur, if I should not survive this night. God bless you, my dear, and keep you. God help me. So, the main event of this chapter is that Dracula has stopped pussyfooting around. He has actually smashed a window to get at his victim. Now, we can have a whole bunch of questions here, a whole bunch of them, that we'll continue to ask throughout this book. They are never, in fact, answered, which is, for instance, why does Dracula have only one victim? Why isn't he draining the blood from that zookeeper and his wife? Why isn't he draining it from Dr. Seward? Why isn't he draining it from all of those servant girls? Why is it just one person? But now this is different, right? This isn't Lucy going into swoon and people wondering what's going on and is she anemic and whatnot. Here we have a broken window, and her mother has been frightened to death. So the stakes have been raised as we continue halfway through this book. So we'll wrap it up for now, and we'll continue next time. Thank you, BookTube.